On January 19, 1995, an X-31 experimental aircraft took off from NASA's Dryden Flight Research Center for a routine test flight. When the chase pilot abruptly made a series of radio calls quoting NASA, the game was over. NASA was victorious. We've had an ejection. We've had an ejection. The plane is descending over the North Base. I have a chute coming up. The pilot is out of the cockpit, and the chute is going well. Despite the loss of the first prototype, the X-31 program was a successful collaboration between the US and Germany. In fact, the program was revolutionary in more ways than one. Between 1990 and 1995, the only two X-31 models flew over 500 times, providing valuable information for the design of next-generation, highly maneuverable fighters. Rockwell International, an American manufacturing conglomerate, received Pentagon approval in 1987 to complete their newest experimental fighter, the X-31. The aircraft was a collaboration between the American company and the West German aerospace manufacturer Messerschmitt Bölkow Blohm, which had been testing the viability of thrust vectoring hardware and software in advanced flights for 6 years. Thrust vectoring is the ability of a vehicle to control its attitude or angular velocity by manipulating the direction of the thrust remit engine. This technology would significantly improve flight maneuverability in close air combat, giving the United States an advantage over the Soviet Union. Rockwell and Messerschmitt Bölkow Blohm split the funding provided by both governments to build the aircraft, with the American company receiving 80% of the funding. According to the agreement, Rockwell was responsible for the design and assembly of the airframe, while MBBI provided other significant components. The design was based on both original parts and pre-existing components of several aircraft to reduce costs and manufacturing time, including the British Aerospace Experimental Aircraft Program and the F-16 Fighting Falcon F-16 Kexel, V-22 Osprey, F-20 Tiger Shark, and B-1 Lancer with fuel. The X-31's tailless delta wing weighed 16,100 pounds and had a wingspan of 23.83 feet. The design speed was Mach 0.9, with a maximum altitude of over 40,000 feet. However, during thrust factoring effectiveness tests, it was capable of reaching supersonic speeds at lower altitudes. The X-31 also featured a canard for stability and control, allowing the aircraft to perform angle of attack maneuvers that were previously unattainable by conventional aircraft. On October 11, 1990, the first prototype took to the skies for the first time. They broke many records and established several milestones with the second model X-31-2. The pilots achieved thrust vectoring in flight during the initial phase of test trials at Rockwell International's California facilities, expanding it to a 40-degree angle of attack. In February 1992, the flight operations were relocated to NASA's Dryden Flight Research Facilities at Edwards Air Force Base at the request of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Once in Dryden, engineers from both companies, along with a team of international pilots, pitted the experimental plane against comparable aircraft that lacked thrust factoring capabilities to assess the X-31's maneuverability in simulated air combat. The X-31s outperformed all other aircraft with a potential kill ratio of 30-1. The second prototype then achieved controlled flight at an angle of attack of 70 degrees on November 6, 1992, which was twice as much as a similarly shaped aircraft could achieve. The following spring, the same model completed the Herb's maneuver, a rapid post-stall 180-degree turn. Karl-Heinz Long, a German pilot, began preparations for a flight test aboard the first X-31 prototype on January 19, 1995. He had long followed all security protocols that would allow him to glide down the runway and into the skies, and he had noticed nothing wrong with the aircraft. However, ice began to form on the plane's pilot tube 43 minutes into the mission. The incorrect airspeed data was then sent to the aircraft flight control computers, which are in charge of reconfiguring the X-31 for lower speeds. The experimental aircraft then began to oscillate uncontrollably, pitching to a 90-degree angle of attack, forcing Long to eject as quickly as he could. Carl's career as a test pilot was ended when the empty aircraft crashed near the northern boundary of Edwards Air Force Base. Unfortunately, the first X-31 prototype was destroyed. On January 13th, 6 of the X-31 program's highest-ranking collaborators gathered at the base to discuss the accident and figure out what they could learn from it. Even though the X-31 team was a highly skilled and experienced international crew, mistakes and accidents happen even to the best of them. After a thorough investigation, the 6-person panel determined that other factors that contributed to the ice inside the Pilot 2 included the use of an unheated keel probe instead of the more common heated pilot tube. In 2005, NASA released X-31 Breaking the Chain, a 39-minute film that recounted the events of the 1995 crash. According to the feature, a combination of independent errors, such as the fact that the accompanying chase pilot couldn't hear Long's radio conversation with his base, prompted the pilot to eject to save his life. Footage from the crash showed the plane adopting unusual postures as the computer used false information to attempt flight control following the pilot's ejection. Despite the loss of the first prototype, the X-31 program was regarded as a huge success. Following the loss of the first prototype, the remaining aircraft displayed its thrust vectoring capabilities in 21 demonstration flights at the Paris Air Show in June 1995. From 1990 to 1995, the X-31, the first international experimental aircraft development program managed by an American government agency, logged 580 flights and 559 research missions, vectoring extremely short takeoff and landing control. In 2003, the Vector program resulted in the first autonomous landing of a manned aircraft at a high angle of attack. The program's data eventually led to the development of the X-47A and X-47 bits UCAV demonstrators. That spring, the X-31 team received the Von Karman Award from the International Council of Aeronautical Sciences for over 20 years of successful transatlantic research and development teamwork, which resulted in the first international X-plane and significant breakthroughs in thrust vector and control. After the Vector program ended, the surviving Sol X-31 was retired and flown to Germany's Deutsches Museum Flug der Sledgeheim, where it remains to this day. That's all there is to this one-of-a-kind Vector aircraft. What are your thoughts on this experimental flight? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. Subscribe to our channel to see even more fascinating warplane documentaries. We'll see you in the following video. Take precautions.